If you are a landlord or property investor, you've probably noticed more and more people talking about supported and social housing over the last couple of years. And the reason is fairly simple. A lot of landlords are looking at the private rental market and thinking this is getting tighter, this is getting more regulated, more expensive to run, and in a lot of cases, less profitable than it used to be. So in this video, I want to break down why some landlords are moving away from standard private lets and looking at social and supported housing instead, where the appeal is, and where people get caught out if they go into it for the wrong reasons. The reason people are changing strategy is that private lets have become harder work for less margin. You have tighter compliance costs, more licensing in some areas, tenant rights that are arguably too intense now, and more restrictions in general coming into the sector. On top of that, tenant arrears, voids, repairs, and general management all eat into your numbers very quickly. A lot of landlords are asking whether the return now matches the effort and the risk that they're putting in, and in plenty of cases, that answer is no. The second reason is income. Social housing can often produce stronger rents than standard private lets because the property is being used in a specific way and meets a specific housing need. That might be people leaving care, adults with learning disabilities, people with mental health support needs, homelessness, accommodation, so temporary accommodation whilst they move into permanent, or any other supported tenant groups depending on the model that is chosen. From a landlord's point of view, the attraction is usually one of three things. First, it's the higher gross income. Second is the longer term arrangements. And then third is a more structured setup when working with the right provider or the right social housing operator. Instead of relying on one private tenant paying market rent every month, you might be working with a charity or registered provider who takes on the occupancy and then the day-to-day support of the person or the people. And for some landlords, that feels much more stable and it is far less hassle. Now, another big reason why landlords are changing strategy is not just the rent, it's the regulation and the control. In a standard private let, the legal position is shifting quite a lot. The Renters' Rights Act comes into full swing on the 1st of May. What that means in practice is Section 21 no fault evictions go, fixed term ASTs go, and private tenancies move on to this rolling periodic system. So landlords lose that clean 2-month no fault route that they used to rely on before, and tenants gain a lot stronger security. If a landlord wants the property back, they now need a legal ground, and if the tenant does not leave, they still have to go through the court process. If you want the property back, you cannot recover possession in the first 12 months on the basis that you want to sell or move yourself in or move like a close family member in. Even on rent arrears, the mandatory threshold is tougher, moving from 2 months up to 3 months, and the notice period goes from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. So from a landlord's point of view, the private let is becoming a more regulated, slower moving arrangement. Now compare that to leasing a property to a social housing or supported housing provider under a proper lease. In that setup, you are usually not contracting directly with the end occupier at all. Your tenant is the provider. So the private renter changes around no fault evictions, tenant notice rights, and the new possession grounds do not land on the owner in the same way that they would in a normal private buy-to-let. That is why some landlords are changing their tenant strategy. They are moving into a structure where they are leasing to an organisation on an agreed lease term instead of private let terms. And to be fair, that does not mean the regulation disappears altogether. The provider still has to manage the occupier properly, and supported housing has its own rules, risks and standards. But from the owner's side, it can mean fewer of the private let pressures that are now making ordinary buy-to-let less attractive. Landlords aren't really just changing tenants, they are effectively changing their business model. If you move from private lets into supported or social housing, you are not just targeting a different tenant type, you are stepping into a space that involves care needs, safeguarding issues, local authority relationships, benefit structures, building suitability. Now, a landlord will tend to never get involved with this directly, as this is down to the provider, but they do need to bear it in mind when making their properties compliant and getting them ready. There can be less exposure to constant tenant churning and compared to some private rental setups. The model can solve a real housing problem, which matters more now because there is a huge demand for supported accommodation in many different areas. If you work with a credible operator, there can be clearer structure around how the property is used, maintained and occupied. Credible operators will also have constant demand which needs to be filled. If you've got relationships with them, then it stands to reason they'll use you over and over again. For some investors, all of this is more appealing than chasing standard private tenants in an increasingly difficult market. To be fair, supported housing is not automatically safer. There are still real risks. You need the right operator or provider. You need to understand who is responsible for what. You need to understand the lease terms, your repair obligations, the local authority environment, and whether the model actually all stacks up together. Tenant type is a big one too. Some landlords aren't happy to have vulnerable tenants in their property, and to be honest, that is okay. Some of the tenants do come with a higher risk profile, which just is not for everybody. Before you jump into social housing, just make sure you think of this. Who is the provider? What is their track record? How is the support delivered? What happens if their tenant referrals stop? What happens if the local authority changes its position? And what happens if the operator fails? All of this would affect your lease, your cash flow, and the people living inside your property. So why is this shift happening now? I think mainly because pressure in the private rented sector is pushing landlords to look for alternatives. Private lets are feeling tighter, supported housing looks more resilient, and for the right property and the right setup with the right team, it can be. But it can only work when the model is compliant and if there is a real need there. So if we strip it right back, landlords are not moving into supported and social housing just because they want different tenants. They are moving because private lets are becoming more difficult to run, margins are getting squeezed, and supported housing can offer a different balance of income, a different balance of stability and a higher demand. But do remember, it's not a shortcut. It is a specialist model, and that is really the key point. Once you've got those pieces in place, it can be a very strong strategy. But if you ignore the compliance, the operator quality, or the actual need for housing in a certain area, things can go wrong very quickly. If you're looking at supported housing and trying to work out whether it actually fits your portfolio, start by understanding the model first before you look at the headline numbers, because the numbers mean nothing if the setup doesn't work. If you want to get involved in social and supported housing and you want help finding social and supported housing properties to invest in, just click the link in the description below, book in a call with me, and we'll take it from there. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.